Hello YouTube, Tai Chi Twins here. In this video we're going to explore the Japanese art of drawing the sword and how it could be applied to different types of swords other than a katana. The first thing to talk about when we're discussing drawing and sheathing a sword is going to be the scabbard itself. In actuality, the scabbard is the most important part of this process. One of the unique things about the way a katana scabbard is worn is it's not physically attached to the belt. It just slides into the belt itself, and it's got this little notch on the side that stops it from pushing through all the way. But if you need to, you can actually remove it and set it down. In Japan, it was actually rude to carry your sword inside a building, so that's why it was designed that way. Now, as I move in a little closer on this, one of the other key features is with a Japanese sword, if you turn it upside down, the sword should not fall out of the scabbard. You can even get a good shaking, and it should be sealed in there. A lot of training swords aren't designed that way. For instance, here's a practice training katana. If I turn this one upside down, it comes right out of the sheath. This is also a training katana, and it did the same thing. It would just slide right out of the scabbard at any time it wanted to. So I'll show you one of the modifications I made to this sword is you'll notice on the inside, I just put a little bit of masking tape. I just started with one layer, and when that wasn't enough, I just added a second layer to the other side. So that now, when I put the katana away, it's all nice and loose, slides and everything really nice, until I get down to this very end. And you'll notice now, it sits there just slightly above the scabbard. So I now have to reach up with my thumb and seal the katana. As soon as it's sealed, I can turn around and shake it and it won't come out. That's a very important feature for a scabbard. The problem with your katana sliding around all willy-nilly is when you go to push it out in front of you, if you do it with a significant force, the katana comes out of the scabbard. Problem with that is all of a sudden I'm grabbing the blade instead of the handle, which is a pretty good way to lose your fingers. Good luck picking your nose after that. The other feature of a katana scabbard is the fact that it's not physically attached to the belt. Now you saw on the other training katana, it had a string called the Iaido that hangs off this little knob right here. That string is designed to tie to the belt so that you don't remove the scabbard completely from the belt, or so that somebody else can't take it. But we're here in modern day, you're probably not carrying this around as a self-defense weapon, so you probably don't have to worry about somebody else taking it from you. The main thing is that you can freely move the scabbard from the belt. And it's really just stopped by this knob right here on the side of it. This knob sits right on the belt and prevents it from going all the way through and losing the sword. In other weapons, like for instance, here's a Chinese broadsword, you'll see this is designed to have a string or a chain attached to 2 points, and then your belt goes right through that chain. Problem is, now that scabbard's attached to your belt unless you do something about your belt. You could put this into your belt without it. Problem is, now this is getting caught on the belt, and it could certainly destroy the belt, or it could destroy the little attachment. If this is what you wanted to do, you would have to figure out a way to be able to get this little protrusion off and figure out how to attach a knob to the side of it so it doesn't slide all the way through your belt. Keeping the features of the scabbard in mind, I'm now going to show you how they draw the sword in Iaido. Iaido is the Japanese art of drawing and sheathing the sword. Now, they insist that the katana is the best sword to do this with because the curvature of the blade actually adds to the drawing of the blade. But through my practice, I have actually figured out that it has nothing to do with the sword itself. The number one key feature is the scabbard. You'll notice that as I grab the scabbard on my side, I'm grabbing it right up next to the sword itself. I actually have my hand right up against the tsuba. You want this so that your thumb on the side can push up and break the seal on the katana. Once the seal has been broken, it makes it easier to draw it. So the very first step is to break the seal and push the hand right out in front of your belly button. You'll see I've got the seal broken by about 1 inch. My thumb is not in front of the blade. As soon as it comes out, that's a big old gash in my thumb. Instead, I'm pushing up on the side, so it comes out if I touch any part of the blade, it's the side of the blade. Key is once the blade is unsealed, you then want to move your thumb to a full grip so there's no chance of cutting it. That's the first step to practice, in my opinion. It's just what you're doing with the sword. I would stand, push the sword in front of me, and time, as soon as the sword gets there, I'm pushing with my thumb. The seal should be broken at the same time that the sword gets out in front of me. So I'll just keep practicing that over and over again until it's smooth. Once you're comfortable with the coordination of sliding the sword forward, it's now time to add your sword hand into it. And I'm just going to focus on bringing it right in front of my belly button. I'm using that as my main point of reference. So that now I'm pushing the sword out, breaking the seal, and grabbing the katana at the same time. And that's all you're going to practice in the beginning. Just get that timing all together. Another thing to address is how you hold the katana. In the movies, this is how you see him hold it, which is completely wrong. As soon as I swing the blade this way, it puts a lot of stress right here to the top of my wrist. Plus, if I point the blade at you this way, you can see my hand around the guard, which means it's going to get cut. Let's take a look at the example of the John. When you hold a Tai Chi sword, you actually rest your index finger right along the guard itself. This is going to allow you to rotate the blade to whatever angle that you want. It also allows you to swing forward and not have any stress on the top of the wrist. I use the same grip when I hold the katana. You'll notice it's mainly these 3 fingers and the thumb that's holding the blade in place. This finger stretches up away from the other fingers. I can even pinch the side of my wrap here a little bit to get some good control over what my grip is doing. This allows me to fully extend the blade without any stress to the top of my wrist. Then if I point the blade at you this way, you'll notice now that my hand is further away from the guard, it actually guards my hand a lot better. I'm hiding behind the tsuba. Once you're comfortable with that, now it's time to draw the sword. Now the way the sword is going to draw is going to be determined by what direction the scabbard's facing. If the scabbard's facing straight up, when I draw the sword and I pull the scabbard off, you'll notice that the sword will come out at either an angle or it'll come straight down, because that's the position of the blade as it comes out of the scabbard. If I want to change to a horizontal strike, when I push the sword out in front of me, I'm going to have to turn the katana at the same time. So I'll have to train that. I'll turn the katana, grab the blade. Now the key is in pulling off the scabbard. As soon as you pull off the scabbard, the sword wants to go, but you have to pull the scabbard back far enough. If you want to change it to do an upward cut, I've got to do a big rotation of the sword to basically invert it and get the blade pointing down. I would do that all at the same time as I'm bringing the sword out in front of me. Then when I remove the scabbard, now you'll see the sword wants to cut up. But then I'm going to have to fix the scabbard when I go to put the sword back in. I wanted to give you a quick comparison about how traditionally a sword is drawn. You'll see this is actually attached to my belt. Off camera, you should have seen it. It was very hard to get the belt through there and weaved in the right way to have it tied properly. Now you can imagine walking into somebody's house, if I want to take the sword off, I now have to take the belt off too. How awkward is that? That's just the first point. But then also you'll notice, once I push the sword down to where I can grab it, I now have to reach across my body. I can get it turned in front of my belly button, so this is somewhat comfortable. But when I go to draw the sword, I actually have to pull the sword out of the scabbard. The problem is if you've got an opponent that doesn't want you to draw the sword. If I reach over and I start drawing it, he can keep me from getting it out, which obviously becomes a major issue. The difference is with the katana that moves freely in the belt, he's not going to have all of this time to react. By the time I get my hand out in front of me, he stuffs my draw, but I can still take the sheath off and I can still hit him with the sword because I can remove the sheath from the sword, which is the main concept we're looking at. In comparison, the speed draw is more efficient than the traditional draw. While Jeremy does reach for his sword first, I've already pushed my sword out in front of me. It's ready to strike. As he's drawing his sword, I'm already striking. Normally, a katana is a two-handed weapon. You'd want to hold it with both hands. You'll notice when I have it with both hands, this other hand is very close to my scabbard already. And because of how it's pinned into my belt, I can feel it pushing on my hip. So I always subconsciously know exactly where that scabbard is. This is the important part. I need these fingers to be able to reach over where the sword's going to go into play. Cool thing about the katana, it's only got one edge. So I'm going to take the dull edge, I'm going to place it on the back of my hand, I'm going to slide it to where I can pinch it with my fingers. Now this one has a furrow, which is really nice because my fingers can travel through that like a track to be able to guide it directly into the scabbard without looking at the scabbard. Then I push the scabbard on and I return the sword to the side. Again, the footwork has to match what we're doing. It's going to give us more power and it's going to make us smoother. You'll notice when I drew the sword, I pushed the sword out and I stepped. Then I removed the scabbard and I did my strike. Once I return the sword to the scabbard, there's a couple of ways. The best way is to keep my feet here. That way, if my opponent comes at me again, all I have to do is take the scabbard off and I can instantly strike. So typically, the way the form would work, you return the blade, slide the scabbard up, then as you slide the blade back into place, you bring the feet back with it. On the other hand, if my drawing strike killed my opponent, I can be a little bit more casual about returning the blade. I draw, when I do the kill shot, shake off the blood, I return the sword to the scabbard, and I can slide my feet back as I return the scabbard onto the sword. That's Iaido in a nutshell. It's actually a lot more complicated and a lot richer than what it looks like in the beginning. A lot of it is imagining different angles that your opponent's attacking from, whether you're attacking first or whether your opponent gets the upper hand, and how are you going to deal with that? It's a lot like doing karate forms, but with a sword, so it's more fun. So the point I'm going to leave us on is the footwork. Because obviously, outside of being able to get the scabbard off the sword, if you're stuck in one spot, there's a bigger chance you could get beat. So there's a couple of concepts that's used in Iaido. Maybe I am the aggressive one. If I'm the aggressive one, I'm trying to get the attack in between beats, or maybe even before he reaches for his sword, I need to be able to close the distance from being a safe distance to being a dangerous distance. So what I would do in this case, I'm right-handed. I'm grabbing the sword with my right hand, so that means my right foot has to move. And I'm going to time breaking the seal, pushing the sword out in front of me, grabbing the sword, and stepping all at the same time. Just to turn from the side so you can see it, I'm pushing, breaking, stepping, all simultaneously. Once you get the timing of all of that moving together, the next step is just getting the scabbard off the sword as quick as possible. You bring it up, you get the scabbard off the sword, then when you're done, you want to focus on resheathing the scabbard. And actually, when I sheath it, I want to put the scabbard back on the sword instead of putting the sword back in the scabbard. Now, if I need to draw it again, I need to draw the sword from all the way over here. If instead I put the scabbard on the sword, if I need it, all I need to do is take the scabbard off again and I can strike. It's very fast. Also, one other point about drawing the sword is if I'm doing a defensive backward step. Odds are if I'm defending backwards, it's because my opponent got his sword in the fight quicker than I did. I can make my draw a little bit faster if, as I remove the scabbard, I'm stepping back. You'll notice I get my foot and the draw of the scabbard to happen at the same time. This way, if my opponent beats me to the draw, I can make my draw a half step quicker and cut him as he's doing his draw. The forward step is the easiest one, so practice that first. Once you're comfortable, practice stepping away. Also, try stepping off at angles. That way you can work on dodging the attack and counter-striking simultaneously. Now let's take a look at how the art of Iaido could apply to different swords. One of the problems that I've recognized is because the katana is just a single edge, as I mentioned earlier, you have to rotate the scabbard to get the sword to go at the angle you want. This could be made easier with a double-edged sword. Here's a Chinese John. Obviously it's different. There was an extra piece here that would be used to hold a chain or a string just like in that broadsword. But I've modified this one a little bit so that it just slips right down into my belt. Here's the disadvantage, a couple of disadvantages. First of all, there are two edges on this sword, so I don't have the safe edge that I can use to sheath the weapon. Also, as I go to draw the weapon, I don't have something on the side to push on to break the seal. If I break the seal this way, again, you see that very dangerously puts that right in line with my thumb. So I can't actually use my thumb to break the seal. In this case, I did modify it so it doesn't come out, but if I shake it a little bit, it'll hopefully slip out. So I don't have to put a whole lot of pressure to draw it. But now here becomes the advantage of this style of sword. Because the handle is geometrically the same on both sides, it doesn't matter how I grab it. I could grab it the traditional way you would with a katana, where I push it out in front of me, I grab it with my fingers up, then when I take it out of the scabbard, it'll strike straight down. But if I want this strike to go straight up, I don't have to grab it and twist it in a weird way. I'll just put the sword out in front of me, grab it like normal, take the sheath off, and it automatically causes that upward cut. If I want it to be a horizontal cut, I've got options. I could either rotate the blade out this way, or I could rotate the blade out this way. But then when I grab it and I take the sheath off, the sword automatically comes out in a horizontal strike. Here's the other problem with the double-edged sword and doing this with the John. I'll get it close so that you can see. It's a little bit more dangerous. If I'm sliding it this way, there's a very real chance I could cut my hand. So what I figured out is I take my thumb and I bend it. That puts the knuckle right up above. There's no central furrow on this one, but I don't know if it shows up on the camera. Each one of these edges is concaved on the inside a little bit. So if I take the edge of the thumb and I can draw it through the concaveness, you'll see it leads it right into the tip so that I can resheath it. It's not nearly as easy as with the katana. The katana has a safe edge and is designed to be sheathed that way. My main point is it doesn't have to be a katana to be able to do this style of training. You just need to get used to how your sword works along with your scabbard. Here's a side-by-side comparison of doing the drawing technique with two different styles of sword. Notice how similar they are, but then also notice there are some differences as well. These are what you have to work through in your own drawing practice. What style of sword do you practice with? Leave a comment down below. As with any skill, it takes practice and proper training to get good at it. So make sure you look for a good school in your area. If you're in Southern Oregon, contact us for our locations and times. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, like it and make sure to share that with a friend. Click the subscribe button and then hit that notification bell so you can catch our next exciting video.